Welcome back to the newest edition of MyCase Monday. This is the video series where we focus on MyCase accounting, and this is a demo file. So if you're new to this channel, this is something that 8am provides me access to because I am a MyCase consultant and education partner. So this is a demo file for a fictitious firm. Multiple consultants have access to this. So all the transactions are test transactions. I have logged into MyCase, and it always takes you to the home screen first, but we're focusing on accounting. So down here on the left-hand side under modules, we're going to pop open the accounting. We've already reviewed dashboard. And so we're now into the banking menu. And within banking, we've already reviewed the banking tab, the deposit slips, and today we're on checks. So this check menu is effectively your check register, but notice that by default, it includes all checks from all bank accounts. Now, the reason why I know there's multiple accounts, besides the fact that I'm in this file often, so I know that there's multiple accounts, but just looking at this from bank account, operating trust, operating trust. So there's these checks that are in here are checks that are from any bank account. Okay, so this menu is just meant to be a list of every check written in MyCase accounting. Now, I say written, and I don't necessarily mean that you went into MyCase accounting and typed up a check and then printed the check for MyCase accounting. It could be if you pulled a check from your check stock and hand wrote it and then issued it and signed it and sent it to somebody, you still have to create that entry within MyCase accounting too. So this check log is just a check of all checks that have been issued on this bank, on any of your business bank accounts. So the couple things that you can do on this screen, initially it defaults to showing you every check. It's in date order from newest to oldest. And you can go in if somebody asks you a question and you're like, oh, somebody says, hey, well, what happened with check number 124? And you're like, I don't know. So you can go in here and type in check 124, apply the filter, and it'll pop, it filters that entire list. Because imagine most law firms, even if you're a solo, you're going to have quite a few checks every month. And over time, this check register gets highly populated, right? So that's where these filters come into play. So we typed in a check number 124, 124 pops up, and then here's information that you can see about it. It gives you right away the check number, who it was written to, the date it was written, any memo that you put into any memo line that you filled in. So that would show up here as well. And then the account that it's from. Now this status, uncleared, means that you wrote the check, but it has not yet been cleared through your bank. And how this flips is when the reconciliation's done, which is a different screen, but we'll talk about that on a different video. And then total paid is the amount of the check. Now, the couple things that you can do with this, you can print it. So if you click on the print, my default is I'm an I'm a paperless office. I've been paperless for a long time. So my default, I do have a printer, but I actually use it mostly 99% of the time as a scanner. But so default, but you can go in here and you can select different printers. And then this would be set up to where if you had typed the check in and had not yet printed it on check stock to be able to give it to whoever the payee is, you could queue up this print and then hit print and it'll print on your check stock. Okay. And then view. So when you click the little eyeball, this will give you a variety of information about this check. Now, it gives you quite a bit of what you had already seen on the summary, but it gives you additional things. This first, the vendor or the payee, that was already, you saw that on the summary screen. Same thing with the payment account. Now, balance, this has to do with whether this invoice from this vendor was set up as accounts payable first. So some firms, as they receive each invoice from a vendor, they queue it up into accounts payable. What that does is that generates a list of all the bills that you owe to anybody. Okay, so anything that the firm owes would be posted into your accounts payable account, and that's just a holding account. And things will sit there until you're ready to pay them. And then when you go to pay them, the check would get printed from accounts payable and then the check would be issued. And so here, say that this invoice was really $500 and this check only paid $250 of it, the balance would say $250. Okay. So that's what this is meant to talk about. And then for this vendor, you'll have the address that it was sent to, the check date and the check number and the memo. This account, so accounting is called double entry, meaning there has to be two accounts for every transactions that is posted. Normally you don't see that because what you're doing is you see the check, like the check register. So this is for medical records. You would see client costs advanced as an expense. The expense is being posted, but the check has to come out of the checking account. So there are two sides to every transaction. It depends on what type of account it is, but things have to balance in accounting. You won't see the offset to some of the stuff, but it does happen behind the scenes on every single transaction. So here we're going to cancel to get out of this. If we issued a check and for whatever reason, either the check amount was the wrong amount, we can void that check. And so you would click this void, and then this is going to, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to mess up. This is somebody else's check that was using this. But you would go in here and put your void date and any notes. So you could say, void date today, check was lost in the mail. And then you can click void and it'll void the check and you can reissue it or however you need to resolve it from there. But you can also, if we just go across these filters, you can, there's 4 different bank accounts that's set up in this MyCase demo file. So you could filter to just show the checks issued by this trust account. Or if you go through here and you're like, I would like to know all checks issued to this vendor, landlord. And so there's 2 checks, so you can filter. So that's what these filters are for. And then one that I probably use the most are uncleared. And this is usually if I'm reconciling an account, one step that I do after I reconcile an account, I'm like, congratulations, another bank account reconciled. But one last step is to go through what are called uncleared transactions, meaning you have transactions in your bookkeeping that have not cleared your bank account. So they're called uncleared. And the reason why this is, let me just show you this. So when you filter for the uncleared, and I'm recording this in October 2025, if I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a check that I wrote in August of 22 that has not yet cleared my bank. And by now, I would be highly concerned about all of these if I were reconciling a bank account at September. So like if I'm in October 2025, I would be reconciling my September 2025 accounts. And all of these would concern me because these transactions, if you're on a cash basis, and potentially if you're an accrual basis for your tax return, these would have been reported as expenses paid, yet they're uncleared, meaning they've not cleared your bank account. And some of these, they might be mad at you. So Printers R Us, we have 2 checks outstanding for them. There's this one from April 25 and August of 22. And, for a total, whatever that is, $252. And so there's potential issue with the vendor that they may be assessing you late fees at this point. I don't know, or withholding information, for medical records. They may be withholding the medical records, which I hope by now you would have realized 3 years later that you don't have the medical records that you requested. But from my perspective as an accountant, my concern is your tax return, because these were all reflected in your tax return as an expense, but they've not cleared your bank, which is legit. Don't get me wrong. It's completely on the up and up that you write a check and then that expense gets reported on your tax return. Where I'm concerned is that Dr. Schwartz here doesn't have his $100 and it's 2 years later. So my concern is, was the check lost in the mail? Something happened if this didn't clear your bank account. So you need to fix this. And the other part beyond your tax return is you need to make sure these checks are uncleared. You need to make sure you have that money in your checking account. Because what if all of these vendors today found their check, say it got stuck in a desk drawer, all of them, however many vendors that is, they all today had misplaced your check. They all had it in their desk drawer. They all decided today's the day they're going to take the check to the bank and cash it because of digital banking. It's going to clear your account tonight. Do you have $2,500 sitting in your checking account to clear? So if these checks all cash tonight, could they clear? So there's just multiple things that concern me, which is why I do go back and look at uncleared checks. And then the last filter here is if you want to filter this checklist. Now, the default, I was in here already earlier. This default is 5. So I think every single time I open up MyCase, it always defaults to 5 rows. And then I just by nature always go to the largest, whatever the largest number is, which, I mean, 100 is a lot. Like I'd be scrolling down this page to see all 100. And, it's great that you have options to whatever's here, but with 5, now I have 2 pages and now I feel like I'd rather scroll down a page than have multiple pages. And the reason being just my personal preference is that if I'm looking for something specific, I like to use Control F and then my search bar pops up and then I can type whatever I'm looking for and it'll highlight that word for me. So that's my preference, to have everything on one row. But the one last way that you can filter this screen is by time. So if I knew, I just wanted to look at checks written in the last 30 days, and then this is blank like this because nothing met that criteria. So I should have done last year. And so things that were written in 2025. Well, and I should say last year, the filter called last year within MyCase accounting, it's not truly the last year, because to me, I'm in 2025. So last year was 2024 calendar year. Last year as a filter in MyCase means the last 365 days. So where this truly says last 90 days, that'll update the dates to the last 90 days. Last year really truly means last 365 days. So that's how, that filter works. And then the last 2 things that I would talk about on this page. So we can edit our check layout. Now, ideally, you only do this once, but potentially, like, the ability to do this is here because if you order new check stock and for whatever reason your vendor is like, oh, I don't have that same check stock, we only offer this new check stock. Most checks that I've seen is this standard check layout. The check is at the top. And just know that this image you see is the top 2/3. So these are considered to be third, like this paper is really in thirds. So the top third is the actual check. The middle third is the remittance that goes included. So like you would fold this and fold the bottom paper up, and then this goes into the envelope and hand it off to the vendor so that they can process it, because this gives them information that they may need to be able to cash this check in and apply it correctly in their system. What you don't see in here is the bottom third, which is usually a duplicate of this. And back in the olden days, accounts payable clerks would rip off this bottom third and then staple this bottom part, the bottom third, would get stapled to the paper copy of the invoice. And then that went into a file folder into a filing cabinet. Okay. I think these days, if people still print checks, this just gets ripped off and the bottom third gets thrown away. I don't know many that still keep paper files, but this works similarly. These are just flipped. See how like the check is just flipped this way and then the remittance is flipped this way. Now the bottom third, 1/3 of this paper is a duplicate of this top third. but you have the ability that you could change the check layout, how it's going to print. Okay. And then that's it. That's the only thing you can do with the check layout. And then this last piece is you want to write a check. So you can go in here and say, I want to write a check to a customer or a vendor. And that matters because it changes your drop down. So if I pick customer, it's now going to only let me select customer names, and then a vendor, and it's only going to let me pick vendor names. And then I would have to pick which bank account this is going to be paid from. It's going to, as a reference, going to give me what the current balance is. And it knows this because it knows what I have my check log in here and I have all my deposits. So my current balance is $577. Now, if I had set up my landlord vendor correctly, the address would have populated in here. And then today's check date, it will automatically include the next check number. So October 2025's rent. And because it's rent, so you can filter which account this is going to go. And then again, I can just put October 2025 rent and the amount, $5,000. This split transaction means if you wanted to split how this expense is going to be posted in your books. September 2025 utilities, because utilities are billed after you consume them, right? So say that was $500. So if I paid rent for $5,000, but my utilities was $500, I would put those things in here, correctly totals what the check amount is. And then you get one last chance that if for this specific check, you wanted to use the standard layout versus bottom third, it'll default to what you set this up in the settings. But for whatever reason, if you need to change the layout right now, you can. And then here I can either save and close, which would work if I'm doing an ACH. If I'm going to pay electronically, or if I went to the vendor website and did an electronic check, I can change the check number here and then I can save and close. Or if I need to print this for real, I would click save and print. And then now it's going to set this up so that I can send it to my printer. And then I would select my printer, and then I would make sure I have my check stock in my printer, and then I would go ahead and print that. So now in my check, which I had this filtered for last 365 days. So this is the check that I just wrote, 132 to landlord, October rent, $5,500. If you have any questions, please comment below. Thank you.